Okay, let's call the Planning Commission February 7th meeting to order at 6:06 p.m. Let's start with considering any agenda amendments that people feel might need to be made or to accommodate them. And any announcements that people may have. We'll take those together. I have a few announcements, but I'll let anyone else go first if they have anything. Sure.
I have an announcement, and then Steve has an announcement as well. So the owner of the Vermont Hempicurean out on that's moved out to West Brattleboro has extended an invite to the Planning Commission. They're going to have 3 businesses there: Vermont Hempicurean, Vermont Bud Barn, and Vermont Grow. So he's extended an invitation for planning commissioners to come out and see it. Steve maybe can fill you in a little bit more. He was out there as the E911 coordinator. I would probably prefer that you individually reach out to him and set something up. But if you want to do it as a site visit, that's fine. We just need to warn it as a meeting, and then it's kind of open to the public too. So I think that that's a little bit challenging. But I can forward along an email with the invitation, and if anybody would like to check it out, you can make arrangements.
Sounds like a good path to take with that.
Yeah,
individually.
And I mean, I think only probably the Hempicurean business is open. Steve, if you want to speak to the state of it at this point. But
yeah, I mean, I was in there maybe a month ago. It's all under construction. Nothing to see at the moment. They may have made a lot of progress in the last month, but there's going to be 4 or 5 businesses in there from what I understand. So
I don't know if you can say this or not soon, Steve, but is this the one? Is this the first cannabis permit that we're receiving, that the town has received?
So yes, I guess. I mean, it was retail to retail, so it wasn't even a change of use part of it. Steve, I don't know if you can speak to how it's permitting a little bit more, if you're familiar with it, but people can start submitting permits, and we have to review them under the existing zoning. So, they were a retail space going to retail, so they really didn't need to make site plan changes, but new businesses coming in could technically submit. We haven't had any yet.
Okay.
Now, what other businesses are going in there, Steve?
So 3 of them are just different sort of sub businesses of Hempicurean. One of them is the grow facility. One of them is retail cannabis. And I think the third one that is also under the Hempicurean ownership is just, I could be wrong about this, but I think it's more of the Hempicurean as it is in downtown, essentially, where it's not retail cannabis, but it's probably a lot of different CBD products and such. But that could be wrong. But the 4th one is apparently either a relocation of or another location of the Leopard Frog store.
The one on Flat Street? Or is it by, because there was a gentleman down there I know wanted to grow before. I'm not, like, I don't know if that's his store.
That's the Hempicurean, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to add for announcements that I mean, it's probably pretty obvious that the town was awarded the Bylaw Modernization Grant. Obvious because you can see we're discussing it later in the agenda. The renewable energy incentive RTM article that I brought after going around to 4 committees, including this one for statements of support, I brought it to the select board and they approved putting it on the RTM 22 warning. So we'll see what RTM thinks of that, and then potentially afterwards I'll try to coordinate some more or I'll keep the planning commission in the loop about if it seems like there's an opportune time or a need to chime in to the select board about how they may formulate the program. And I think it was 2 Fridays ago that Steve, you led the neighborhood character walk survey, and that went pretty well for the first time. I hope people keep, checking Steve's emails and attending those going forward. That's it. If there's no other announcements, yep, Steve.
Yeah, I'll just hop on that and briefly just follow up and say I thought it went great for our first time out as well. Thank you to everyone that came and also everyone that expressed interest. We'll certainly be doing more. I expect to send out a doodle poll with dates for the end of this week and next week or two as well. And we would ideally be able to pick maybe 2 or 3 of those dates. I'm open as well to considering a weekend time slot if that's available for folks. If all 9 to 5 Monday through Friday kind of time slots aren't, certainly don't want you to feel like you're missing out. But other than that, I will be sort of wrapping my brain around how to put together some sort of deliverable to get to everyone, potentially for March's meeting as a memo, so that we can have a sense of where this is going. But in the meantime, watch out in your email box. There'll be more invitations, so hopefully we'll see each other again soon.
Okay, great. Just to catch up a little bit, I'm going to exercise the Robert's rules for small assemblies and just make a motion to approve the January 3rd, 2022 minutes.
I move that we approve the 2022 minutes democratically.
Should I interpret that as a second, Gary? I made the motion. Would someone like to second my motion? Sarah?
I second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion about the minutes, corrections or questions or anything? Going once, going twice, 3 times. Okay, all those in favor, raise your hands if you can. Gary's hand was up. I saw Sarah's, Prudence, mine, and Dan, can you speak or chat or do something in the video?
I think he said in the chat he's on something.
Right.
He's on.
He said he
know if
can
he-
listen.
Does he know how to use the phone?
Maybe
He said he's
phone
using
feature?
cellular data temporarily, so I can listen for now. I hope to get back online ASAP to turn on the camera.
Hmm.
Maybe we should just treat it as an abstention.
Sure. 4 ayes, 0 nays, 1 abstention. Okay, moving on to hopefully taking the action of approving the request for proposals for the bike walk master plan. Yeah, I'll let staff lead us off on that because they prepared the RFP.
Sure. So at the last meeting, we talked about a couple aspects with this grant. One that we wanted to have a steering committee where we were going to invite community members and other people, other stakeholders to sit on that. So that's reflected in the RFP. And then also we had decided that we really wanted a to come out of it with some sort of prioritized list of projects. So I think that's reflected in this RFP. When we last spoke, I was trying to secure some additional money. I was looking at some grants. I was also considering reaching out to the Wyndham Regional Commission to see what part they, if they could even do this project. Regards to the Wyndham Regional Commission, it turns out that there is a procurement requirement that we're a large town, Brattleboro is, and so we need to do it competitively. So we do have to put out an RFP. They're welcome to bid. And then in terms of the additional money, we had about 25,000 originally for this project, and I was able to get it up to 30,000 by using some funding more from my department's budget and more, there's a line item in the sustainability coordinators, and so he contributed to it. So it's a 30,000, I think, dollar project, which feels a little bit better. It's still probably on the low side, but we can obviously put it out and see where it goes. So let's see. Basically the services that are requested correspond to the scope of work in the grant, and that's typical with an RFP. We kind of expanded on it a little bit as to what we're looking for. The project needs to be completed by April 23rd. So I'm looking for this project to start in May, if sooner if we can, but by the time you put it out and get responses and then rank them and then take it to the select board for approval, I think May is probably the most realistic time to get this project going. I didn't have, I put it to April 2023 to finish the plan. That doesn't really align with budget work for next year, but the good news is there's lots of infrastructure funding out there. So for the next couple of years, I don't think that's, a problem in terms of being able to secure some of the state or federal funding that'll come through. So I put the completion date for April 2023, but we can try to make that sooner if that's something that you want. And the rest of it's kind of boilerplate request for proposal language. So I'm happy to open it up to questions or comments.
I'll start by, I want to call on Gary because he has these were in the, he has some documents that he prepared or put together that are in the our folder as supporting docs, and they were in there last month as well, and we didn't talk about them. I could say a bit about them, but they're in there mainly through Gary. I mean, he ran them by me. And Gary, do you want to speak to those?
Well, but I think since now Sarah came along, I'd like to have everybody on board with this to take it in, digest it, get some thoughts on it. Now Sarah's part of the team and the committee, in all fairness. So that way, if there are any questions in regards to, I think you can probably just give a quick synopsis on it, Tom, what it is. And that way Sarah can look at it too. And we could probably get back on that the next meeting, I guess, in March. What do you think? If any of your thoughts on it?
Well, Gary, didn't you say that? So the intent of when this survey that you put together was that you wanted something like this to be reflected in the
Yes,
in the actual work that of the
Yes.
consultants.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I wanted also at the time. So if that can be incorporated as well, that would be great.
Can I ask you a couple of questions about the documents, and then just give a couple observations I have?
Absolutely.
So Gary, I think that you had worked with Molly Burke. So the first document, the Brattleboro, Vermont pedestrian safety, has a lot of good information in it. And I'm just curious where that came from, because I just want to kind of look at the data. I'm questioning the 4 fatal crashes because 2 of the ones that I'm aware of aren't even on that list, and there's several on that I was not aware of. So I'm just kind of curious where that data came from.
Well, what happened was that that was something that Colin had looked up with VTran. Apparently VTran
so
didn't have that.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah,
didn't
VTrans
have
does
that.
have a, So did
And
Colin?
Molly was just at shock and awe herself about the data. And from my personal experiences living on Canal Street and other areas, I kind of questioned that data myself, how it wasn't accurate. There were a lot more than was on there, and I had to dig a little deeper and do some research myself. And that's when I came in with the conclusion that there were more, that there wasn't an update on that. And I believe Molly was looking into that with VTrend and how come that information wasn't inclusive with that, and why was it not put in there?
Okay. Yeah, I just want to check around on the data too, because I think I've used 4, but not these. Canal Street at Clark Street, yes. There was the one at the top of Union Hill, which was the hit and run where you mentioned. There was the other one on Western Ave. So I'm just not, because that looked suspicious to me, it kind of made me question some of the other data.
Right,
Just wanted
because
to
last
kind of-
summer, there was a few on Elm Street with a few of the homeless people. It was quite a few that weren't properly documented. I could probably have sat out there with a chair and counted. I probably know as many there was because ambulances up and down the
Yeah,
street.
for sure. But and so this information is really good. And I think that this, would probably be part of what a consultant would be doing and pulling together. And so, if we can get this in a good shape and share it with the
Absolutely.
consultant, that's, less work that they need to do and more money that can go elsewhere. But I thought this was good. I just am questioning the data because some of it didn't look right to me from what I know. And yeah, so that was my comment on that written piece. In terms of the survey, so surveys are really difficult to do. And I guess I didn't necessarily feel like this survey was going to serve the goals of the master plan. So if we're trying to identify kind of where the gaps are and prioritize projects, this survey doesn't get to that level. And so I feel like it could be retooled to get there, but I think it's another thing that the consultant would help us do. So that's just a comment about the questions on the survey.
Right, because I was looking at the inclusiveness of the shared community with bike peds and with motor vehicles, people with what are those electric bikes, people with motorized handicap wheelchairs. So I was looking at the larger scope with that, inclusive with that as well, if that can be adapted as well somewhere. Even if it's secondary or somewhere where it could be shown that also that there has to be some type of shareability on the road, because that was part, I think, with the bridge project, how they wanted to figure out how wide the bike section should be. But then you're doing that also with vehicles, because you have to figure out, you have to have so many, a certain amount of width with vehicles versus bikes and all that. So seeing that also, plus me being a driver also, sharing the roads with people with non-motorized vehicles in the summer was becoming an impediment, in some cases, some dangerous. I mean, it was some cases on Route 30. Also, as we know, West B is not the greatest as well with vehicles and with people with jogging or with mopeds or whatever. Just throwing that into, because the vehicles are basically sharing the same road with people with wheelchair accessibility, women, people with what is it? God, when they see some of them jogging with their children in those bike areas also, just like on Route 30, the e-bikes, and I've seen the different modes of transportation people are using alongside with that. And I said, there should be more of an inclusiveness with sharing the roads with vehicles, because there is a safety issue there also as well, with people driving up and down the roads on Putney Road, Canal Street, especially on West B as well also.
So, yeah, I think we all see the need, Gary, for sure. So what do we think, Gary? What would you be happy based on what you've heard with, happening with these documents? Like, I have an idea. Can I just shoot an idea out here based off, kind
Absolutely.
of piggybacking off what Sue said? So, we're probably going to approve the RFP, right? And we may make some changes or not. And staff, I think like they always do, gets, kind of links to the consultants that we end up hiring, as much relevant resources as they can, find and know about. And so your background info, the with all that data in it, to the extent that, that it's true, because Sue had, one or two little concerns there. I don't know what's entailed with cleaning that up. I don't know, Sue or Steve or Gary, if that's something one of you or all of you are going to do, or what's going to happen with that, or if this could just go to the consultants as is. But the survey could maybe be, state like this is something that, a commissioner worked on and is interested, wants the plan to address these things. And then just kind of give it to the consultants as something to hopefully integrate or consider. I don't think, Gary, you were planning on this survey being like the survey of the bike walk master plan, right? You wanted
Right,
it
that's correct.
you wanted
Something-
it to influence their work, or to
Yes.
to make sure they covered, those sorts of things. Okay.
Can I, as a response and maybe to kind of see where it could fit in. So I like that the document, does get to some of those equity concerns. And so I think that getting some of that information into the background to kind of highlight that would be really useful. And I think under the project overview, we can talk more about that inclusiveness. Again, making sure, I guess that we're hitting on everything. That'd be my suggestion.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, that's what I look for, is basically that inclusive with the shareability of the roads. Everyone's on the same safety issues, sharing the roads. Yeah, that's something that I was aiming towards, not us just having that selectively itself as a survey. It could be, but I think adding that in there as an inclusiveness, having that to get funding for a different project survey for just traffic would be overkill, I would think. I think putting this together with that would help out boost the awareness of safety on the roads as well too. And I can gather more data if necessary too for this year to see what's going on with the traffic safety issues on the roads and in advance, so I can find out with VTrans where they're at, and also with Molly. Because I was going to was it the traffic safety committee, and that's where I was at, trying to figure out where they said they were saying how safe the roads of Brattleboro are driving. I said, well, I kind of, was a little skeptic on that when it was mentioned, and I wasn't too agreeable in that area, because me, as like I said, as a driver, as a motorist too, also trying to probably get into getting a bike myself. How do I feel safe with motorists and with my daughter going out there jogging or motoring? And I'm a driver myself. How do I feel about another driver? And I'm going down the road. So I think that inclusiveness kind of intertwines. I don't know if that makes any sense. On the opposite, because I'm trying to just elude myself for using cars and lowering emissions, which is a big thing we're trying to do with the bike ped also as well too, to try to get more people to use bikes and to exercise and to get out there and lower emissions. So I think that also is an inclusive, so people can see the safety. Hey, you could park your car too somewhere and get out there and use your bike. You'll go walking and jogging, safety.
Gary, so looking at the RFP that staff made under, services requested, letter C, and then small letter C, they did put in there that that the consultants will work with the planning department to develop an online survey for public input. And since you and Prudence and Dan are, Dan's gone now, are on the are going to be on the steering committee for this, I think you can really keep your eye on the development of that survey, right? And then you can see, going forward. So we're aware of this work that you've done, and I think the background info will get to the consultants one way or another, and your concerns with the survey, or your thoughts will will definitely have their influence, and you can keep making them have their influence, especially with you being on the steering committee. Does that sound good as far as?
That sounds good. Ever forward.
Okay, let's kind of go back to the RFP in general. And what are people, Sarah, your hand was up earlier.
Yeah, I just had a question for Sue. So you mentioned that you had sort of this chunk of money and then you also added some other funding sources. Is there a reason for adding those sources? Like, is 30,000 sort of like the sweet spot? Like, do we get more with, I mean, not obviously, but like,
Yeah.
what's sort of the benefit of adding that extra funding?
Yeah, so just probably better public outreach tools. Maybe we could do a map where they drop pins on it, more time on the prioritization and even their existing analysis. So I had reached out to an engineering firm to kind of with planning to kind of help me put together a proposal, and they were a little skittish on 25. They're like, that's low.
Yeah.
So we could do it, but it means cutting in these certain areas.
Okay, that makes sense.
Prudence? Oh, unmute yourself, Prudence.
Sorry, I thought the RFP looked really good. With just that one question that I emailed to Sue and Tom about in the overview, it talks about the area focus being east of I-91. And so, I mean, we are talking the whole town though. I mean, would we take that out?
Yeah. So I actually, when I read the draft, I saw that and I meant to go back and change that. So, and even with your comment, I didn't pick up on it. Yeah, it is for the whole town. I mean, it's another one of those situations where it's, only a certain amount of funding. So they're probably going to concentrate on more of the developed areas, but that does include West Brattleboro, the Route 9 corridor. We know that there's issues there. So yeah, we will definitely change that. It's not just the neighborhood development area and compact portions east. I'm not sure I can wordsmith this in the moment, but it will be changed.
Great, thanks.
And Sue, I think you addressed it a little bit when you were giving the synopsis in the beginning, and I haven't paid too much attention to the two other municipal planning grants I've been a part of in this aspect, which is 1 month a fine amount of time to get enough applications?
Yeah, 1 month
That's
has been
typical? Okay, great.
reasonable.
Yeah, I don't personally have much to say. I just want to say for the steering committee members, I hope that you all at the opportune times or when it seems important that you'll reach out to me to have a something on the agenda, just to give a report occasionally to the planning commission.
Yep.
Going forward.
Absolutely.
So, okay, thanks. Yeah, if there's nothing else, we can vote on this, and in order to approve it, all 4 of us would have to vote in the affirmative, because I think if I've read our bylaws correctly, the majority of the positions of the planning commission need to vote in favor of something for action to be taken. So
yeah,
but this doesn't seem like a contentious thing to me, so I'm not concerned. I just bring that up for an educational point.
Is the way you got to word that, Tom, when you vote? How are you going to word that?
Well, if anyone has an idea for this agenda item, yep, Prudence.
I move that the planning commission endorse the RFP with the minor changes that we discussed. The walk bike master plan RFP.
Okay, is there a second for that motion?
I second.
Sounds good. If you're in favor, raise your hand.
thank you.
I think Gary can do the little icon he did last time.
I'm working on it.
Or you can just say aye, Gary. Okay, there we go.
There we go. Look at that.
All four of us, unanimous. Great.
Duh.
Ada. Okay, moving on to the next one. The discussion of the bylaw modernization grant, its scope and process, and the level of commission involvement.
Yeah, so we were really happy to get this grant. We've been doing, we made the suite of regulatory changes last summer, but we've identified more that need to happen and just some barriers that we've seen working with it in the office, either through Brian, the zoning administrator, Steve, or myself. Just still finding barriers. So this was a great grant opportunity because it also aligns nicely. We have 2 areas of town that want to look at the neighborhood designation area. And so part of this grant was actually to do that. So, so this would be land use regulation changes. We would hire a consultant who would take us through that process. There's public engagement along the way because that is required from the grant, and it's the best way to do regulatory changes to build the community support for them to get passed. And then we would be looking at the neighborhood development area for West Brattleboro Village or surrounding West Brattleboro Village. The current designation, you can go, I think it's a half mile, or is it quarter mile, half mile? I think it's a quarter mile around a village center. So in that watershed, that it can be in a neighborhood development area. Floodplain cannot be, so that area would come out, although there are some proposed statutory changes going on. So we'll have to see how those shake out. And then also looking at extending the neighborhood development area to the Winston Prouty campus. You may have read in the newspaper that they're looking at how to get some housing development on the campus, not in the existing buildings, but looking at housing development between the Delta campus, which you access off of Route 5 near the Guilford border, and the Winston Prouty campus. So they've been doing a lot of work there, and there are benefits to being in the neighborhood development area. So they're interested in that. So that may require some underlying zoning changes to help facilitate that if it seems to make sense. So we would like to finish this project by the end of the year. The planning commission's role would be, because the planning commission is charged with proposing the land use regulation amendments. So this would be a planning commission project. I would imagine that, maybe monthly, bi-monthly, the consultant would be zooming into these meetings. You'd have some, work to discuss with the consultant, and that's how it would move forward. So this would be a major work product of the planning commission, probably between when it gets awarded or when we have a consultant on board, and hopefully by the end of the year. We don't really want to extend it out too much further, but we'll have to see by the time the proposals come in. So.
Thank you. You answered a lot of questions I personally had, but I do have a couple others or clarifications, but I'll let others go first if they have any questions or ideas or proposals of how to steer this differently, because once again, just like how we did or similar to how we did the bike walk master plan after we were awarded the grant for that last month, we kind of had a preliminary discussion about how to shape the RFP maybe, or the level of involvement we want to have. And then at the next meeting, which was this one, we actually did the final approval. So that's I thought that was actually a good format. And so that's what we're doing with the bylaw modernization grant, having a kind of narrowing of the focus discussion this month, and then next month, hopefully approve a finalized RFP. What do people think?
Still thinking.
Okay, well, I'll go. I'll just ask one. That's great. First of all, that this is a project's going to take less time than the municipal planning grants do, because right, a all the townspeople are concerned about housing. And so if this was going to be like a 2-year or 1.5-year project, that seems quite a bit of time to delay zoning changes when some of those we could make ourselves sooner. But I think, if December or January is going to be the time that we, can have a public hearing, with the zoning changes we choose, then that's not pushing off, taking action in this housing crisis too long. Sarah,
guess-
Prudence, Gary? Oh, Sue.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, this is not a wholesale rewrite of our regulations. We think they're in good shape, but a couple of examples are the denser neighborhoods around downtown. They have the same setback and lot coverage as a suburban, something like Stockwell Drive or Carriage Hill, which are 1980s subdivisions. So we're just finding that that's a little bit difficult, particularly the setbacks, because it's more dense development. So we want to tweak things like that. Or if you think about the Putney Road area, so we want to encourage infill housing there, but we don't have a minimum density. Maybe we want to look at a minimum density so that the housing that we get there is really what we want to see, which is higher density housing. We don't want it to be piecemeal. So like those are things that we might look at with this. So it's, again, not a complete new document, but more easing of the regulations.
So I guess that walk that we had with Steve, I was talking to Steve and Tom, I guess I'll fill you into also. I was looking like Putney Road is a lot there. And also, but I'm trying to figure out, just like Route 30, which is agricultural, and which is going to be used for housing. There is a map, I think Tom showed me, on the difference between ag and what landfill be used for homes, for building, housing and all that. I guess I was looking at maybe, like I talked with Stephen, like in the areas like of Putney Road down that way. Is that more like industrial in a sense? It's not that much land use, because like that gentleman who built that house down from where the police precinct was at. I think there was a woman that built a home down there. They bought that house down there, and there was more area setback as well. Also, was that an area that is considered?
I'm not sure exactly where you're talking about, Gary. I'm sorry.
It's across from where Friendly's is at, when you're going up that hill towards the Brattleboro Police Precinct, next to the cemetery.
Black Mountain
There's a
Road.
home yes, but that's it, Black Mountain Road, that area up that
Are
way.
you talking about the recent development?
Yes,
The one that went before the Development Review Board?
correct.
I'd rather not talk about particular cases.
Well, no, not the case, but I'm saying that area can be used also for us to look into
Yeah,
more additional.
Yep, no, that can be residential. A single family home is a conditional use. I can't recall off the top of my head about 2-family, but I think, but residential is either permitted or conditional there.
I don't want to put words in Gary's mouth, but I'm thinking maybe the question was about whether we can be considering bylaw amendments in places that aren't touched by the NDA, because this is so focused on the NDA.
Yes, we can.
Oh, that's perfect. And I did mention the parking garage. You guys said no, right?
No, I don't know how the parking garage was built. I know that there's been some issues in trying to like hold events on the top floor. I don't understand the engineering of it. So possibly you could put housing over the transportation center, but I don't know. That was a project before my time with the town.
Right, because that's supposed to be under, well, I believe repairs were in order structurally for that. And I see Dottie's has a big open area down there, and I didn't know, because the building next to it is going to be also rebuilt also for housing as well. So that's a good area, right? And the gentleman who owned the motorcycle shop also there's a lot right down there in that area.
Yeah, it's floodplain through there.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Not all the way, but yeah, I mean, there's some constraints, but
Yeah,
So
you're right.
Gary, when you just started talking there, you mentioned the the walking survey that Steve led, and I
Yes.
noticed there's something very similar to that in the in the work plan or in the application. How is that redundant with what Steve is leading here, or what's going on
no,
there?
so what Steve is leading, we had actually talked about it with the consultant that helped me prove that this was a project that could be done for the cost. Because I said, oh, the planning commission's already doing this, so this is more for to bring residents out, to bring people of the neighborhoods out so that they can kind of see it. The work that the planning commission is doing now, though, is going to feed into this project. It's just less that the consultant does. It's something that
Okay.
we took on.
Okay. I'll say that I first, I thought reviewing this, I think it all looks pretty good, but I was looking at the public engagement outreach fraction being, like 9,000 or so out of the 24,000, and that's a pretty high ratio. I'm not saying public outreach is not important. I think it is, but this grant, I thought in my mind is kind of preceded by, a couple things, like we've done the housing action plan, and that I realized wasn't solely focused on zoning. But it did, survey the population, of the town and see the demographics and the needs and the size of houses and, the inventory that we have, et cetera. So, and then we have, the state did, it's not specific to Brattleboro, but the state did that document, zoning for great neighborhoods, which proposes, 3 or 4 dozen things that are tailored, to Vermont, and so applicable to Brattleboro. So knowing that there's that kind of foundation already made me think that this is a pretty high, public engagement fraction, which is, trying to get the will of the people and get ideas of what best suits us. But I think it just seems kind of odd to me that that's such a high percentage. But if the actual implementation part, or the recommendations and final product that the consultants are going to give us, if the amount of money for that is 100% sufficient and will allow them to totally and absolutely complete that to the to the full amount, then I don't have a problem with the public engagement. But I guess that's what I want to know from Sue, from you and Steve. Like, is this at all kind of like the bike ped thing, where we're like, oh, we don't quite have enough money, it'd be nice to have more money for them to do more, work for us, or is this totally more than enough?
I feel like the amount is more than enough. What I would say about the public engagement with this is, one of the things that's come out of the housing action plan is this need for public education. So I think this kind of builds on that. You'll see it soon. I'm just reviewing the final changes, and then we'll release the plan. But everybody says they want more housing, right? And they want it to be more affordable. But then when you actually get down to your neighborhood level, like, you still get a lot of the NIMBY. I don't want it there, or it's too dense, or that kind of, response. And so I feel like things like this missing middle housing video and presentation is going to be very localized, and we can use it to further that as well, and the message of the housing action plan. So I guess I feel comfortable. It is a fair amount of public engagement. We probably could have done less under the grant, but I think there are tools that will be useful for implementing both.
Okay, and the the products that they give us will not suffer as a result of having less money. They have a sufficient amount.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that sounds great to me then. We'll get everything we want. Yep, Gary.
Yeah, so I guess the question I'm asking, once all this has been compiled, put together, implemented in action, how soon do we see Brattleboro building these housing units for the people.
Hmm.
Being that other towns around us seem to be going forward with green lights in their areas, building housing. And I see it a lot lately in a lot of other different, townships I've been reading. Like, but the one I showed you about how they're not, I think it's in Bellisburg. What was it I sent you about the parking garage being knocked down and they're just going to build housing? A lot of that's cropping up even in Putney. They're starting to build housing up there. How soon will Brattleboro start moving forward with
So Gary, a lot of the
Just-
projects, go ahead.
after we
Can
finish
I,
doing
can I
the
let,
survey?
it seemed like
or-
Prudence wanted to answer that, I guess. Oh, unmute yourself again, Prudence.
Sorry. I was just gonna say that both of those projects are Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust projects that were, anyway, they were in the works for a long time. And I guess my understanding is we're gonna try to remove barriers that the zoning might have now.
Uh-huh.
But, we can't build housing and the town can't build housing. And so, we just have to be realistic. There's things that we can do, and then it takes, public-private partnership. There's grant money out there. It's super expensive. It's tough. It's a really tough problem.
Right. I was looking at some of the new registries for landlords and a lot of new things. I've just been watching what Montpelier has been passed. There's a lot of bills that are going to be passed soon for constructioners and all that. I passed that along. I don't know if I might have sent some to Tom and to Sue and to Stephen. There's a lot of buildings that are going to be eligible to go forward once the bills are passed. That being said, once we've gotten our information gathering together and bring it to whomever it needs to be brought to, do we see anyone doing anything as far as zoning and ordinances and how that's going to work to get things moving forward?
I'm not sure how to answer that, but I'll just say that if one of the recommendations or zoning changes that comes out of this, actually it wouldn't be a zoning change at all, but so never mind. I was just gonna say that I'd love to see something like the Preston lot or Harris lot retain being a parking lot, but then having housing above that. And since that's town-owned land, who knows, some sort of agreement could happen with Wyndham Windsor or whoever else. But yeah, like Prudence said, we don't implement, we don't build in this commission, so, or department, so.
So
I don't know.
Sarah put in the chat an article. I can send it around by email. What if they passed zoning reform and nobody came from strong towns?
Yeah, that's an article that I like to refer to a lot in these kind of conversations. Obviously, zoning is an important sort of hurdle to fix or to make less less hard for people. But I think just understanding as sort of this whole ecosystem that just changing zoning is not going to get more housing built, and that there's so many other parts that are happening and going on and causing it to be more difficult. So it's just an interesting example from Minneapolis where they basically, got rid of single family zoning. And I think in the first year there was like 3 permits to build multifamily. And so it just sort of examines like what are the other issues at play. So it's just, I mean, I love everything we do. So it's just a nice thinking piece.
There's a lot of other
Interesting.
mechanisms in
Thanks.
play.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Sarah. I wanted to ask a couple things about the NDA. We touched upon it a little bit last meeting. Sue, can you just touch upon what may be the justification that the state will allow, an NDA to be expanded like so far away from their half-mile zone? If, for the Winston Prouty or the Vermont Ag Education Cooperative, whatever that's called, down on the way to Fort
Baubec.
Dunlop.
I think Baubec's going to be too far.
Okay.
I wouldn't see that one happening. It doesn't have continuous sidewalks.
I just saw that in the application. It was
Yeah, that one I think is probably not a go. We did get it extended a little bit further just because of our development pattern. We have these, mature neighborhoods with sidewalks throughout, and they view the Winston Prouty campus as, being connected by sidewalk, easy to get to Canal Street, on transit lines. So I think the state's willing to look at it. And the state is trying to do what they can to promote housing. So they're kind of excited about the Winston Prouty, what they hope to do there.
Okay.
It's also the case that because we've got about half of that circle that you could draw around downtown being in New Hampshire and not in our jurisdiction, and there's a few large institutional parcels that get carved out, like the hospital and maybe the high school. I can't remember if that's okay. I think they've got that written into that program that you can expand further than otherwise allowable to sort of recoup some of that space so that it's not a punishment, so to speak. But I do kind of wonder if they've got that as well for the village center, for when we have to potentially lose some of that floodplain area, if we might be able to pull it out in certain directions further than a quarter mile. But that's probably a question to just send to Jacob Hemmerich and not ask right now.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I see the justification of like that river thing yeah, it just seems odd to me because there's, they put front and center that this program is for promoting housing and development in smart growth areas, right? But then it's like, oh well, we're in a housing crisis, so let's loosen up that radius a bit. And oh, your town's on a river, so then let's make the half mile on the west direction a whole mile. And then it kind of gets beyond their half mile definition of what's walkable. But I mean, if they're the arbiters of all this and we can justify it to them and they think it makes sense, then sounds reasonable to me. Does the NDA go by parcel boundaries, or can it bisect parcels like right through the middle?
I can't.
Because that Winston Prouty and Delta campus is, they have development close to the road, but then they have hundreds of acres of forest. So
I don't recall if it goes by parcel or not. I'm trying to think of our existing NDA. I can't recall. It definitely, we did speak with the state. It won't work on the Delta campus side, even if you were to kind of put a buffer around Algiers Village and Guilford and kind of make it two towns. It's too far on the Guilford side. So Delta campus couldn't get it. Yeah, I just don't know about parcel or not, or split parcel.
okay.
I think generally it follows kind of the zoning. So if there was like, if there were two districts on the parcel that were really different, they would probably split the parcel.
Okay. Is anyone, Dan, good to see you and see you have a stable connection now. Does anyone want to add anything else, or give staff any input for crafting the RFP for next month, or anything else on this topic? No? All right. Staff does a good job. We almost don't need to be here sometimes. No, I'm kidding. We've had a good discussion. Great. Well, there's no action with that, so let's just move on to the next one. This is something I've wanted to have in our meetings for a while now, but it's not really, time sensitive or urgent. This is just info that staff, prepared a couple documents, and what we have in town is, it's not a zoning district, but it's kind of allows for alternatives in certain situations to the zoning districts, and they're called planned unit developments. And they've been around for some years now and had different iterations and rules associated with them. But in our current zoning has, 5 types of PUDs, like cottage cluster and rural enterprise development. But there's ones that exist from the past that, our zoning that came about with different terms, just like every development has. But they, I thought, maybe these in some ways are kind of like sleeping giants in some ways, because they have the terms under which they began, still exist, and they may be building, have the potential or legality to build, or you have a use that doesn't align with our succeeding updated zoning. But I'm certainly not an expert on this, but that was just my attempt at a little start off. But staff prepared the memo in that document, so I'll let them take it away, and then we can ask any questions that we have.
So the document, I'm just going to put it on screen because it's easier for me to talk through it, and there's some images as well. So I guess to start off, what is a planned unit development? So it's a type of development and regulatory process that permits a developer to meet an overall community density and land use goals without being bounded by kind of the existing land use regulations. So it could be it could be setbacks, it could be density, it could be the mix of uses, it could be having more than one building. And so they've been around for a long time. Nationally, they're just an important tool for flexible development, have always been. As Tom mentioned, we've had different iterations in Brattleboro, and I'm going to walk through what we used to have so you can understand what's kind of sitting under some of the underlying zoning on different parcels. But right now, we do it as an as-of-right development. And so if you want to propose a certain type of project and you can meet the specific requirements of, say, the cottage cluster or the traditional neighborhood development, then it's by right. You have to go through a review process. You go to the development review board. It can be done in pretty much 2 meetings. And so we have the 5 different templates. I'll show you those at the end. Okay, so our old process, which I'm calling the legacy PUD process, was actually a zoning change. And so anybody could come forward with an application. I'll give you the example I'll use because it's real life example, is the Grafton cheese factory. So that had been part of the retreat farm that's out on Route 30, where the Grafton Village cheese is. And then behind it was where they would make the cheese. And that was an industrial use. That was not allowed on the retreat farm at the time under their existing zoning. So they proposed to form a planned unit development there. So, there's the application starts, you have a DRB hearing, and they're kind of looking at kind of the site aspects of it. And then it goes to the planning commission, where the planning commission would comment. And then it would go, they'd feed it back into a second development review board hearing. And then it would go to the planning commission for review and public hearing on whether or not to change the zoning. And then the select board would do it and they would adopt it. And then it would go back to the development review board for a decision. And this was a really long process. And it was complicated. And, I think there were some drawbacks to it. If you're a neighbor and you buy a property, well, at some point somebody could come through and kind of change the zoning. It felt very spot zoning-ish to me. I think that it wasn't probably technically, but it didn't really, it didn't always align with the town plan. And I'm not saying this of the Grafton Village Cheese Factory, but anytime somebody might want to come in, you really should be, putting out how you view an area to be developed in the town plan. And then somebody has a great idea and nobody's saying it's not a good idea, but it doesn't really fit with the community aspirations. And then all of a sudden it goes through this zoning change and happens. So you're going to see in the upcoming map that that happened a lot of times in Brattleboro. What we wanted to do back in 2015 when we updated the land use regulations was just make it, an easier process, streamline the process, make sure that everybody knew what could happen in an area. You could still get the flexibility. And so basically the new process is you can do a planned unit development using any of the mixes of uses in the underlying zoning district. Or actually the template, which we could talk about a little bit later. If it fits your template, then you can, make the application, have it heard at the DRB hearings, and then get a decision. And then if you want a change of use, so we're separating out the use part, then that happens through a new zoning district process with the Planning Commission review and the Select Board adoption. So it's just two very separate things where the legacy kind of combined use, allowed change of uses, and resulted in a new zoning district. So this is our, if you can all see that, okay. This was our 2015 zoning map, and you'll see this tan beige color throughout the map. I'm sorry, it's so small, but it says PUD. So if you can see my cursor, like this is a PUD. This is the SIT campus, World Learning Lands. So all in here. And then there was a PUD. If you can see my cursor now, actually, I might be able to highlight in a moment.
Arrow options in the middle.
There. So, well, this isn't a good color. This yellow, that's like the Fox Farm PUD, which was a PUD that was really never built out. I think there were a couple of parcels that maybe had single family homes on, but it was like a school center for democracy, I think, was on that property. This is another, I think this is the Scanlon PUD. This was going to be residential development, never got built out. You come down here, this is all Retreat Farms down here. This is the Brattleboro Retreat PUD. We've got the hospital is a PUD. You can't see it very well. Let's see, there's some PUDs out in West Brattleboro. There's Mountain Home is a PUD technically. There's it's called the Ash Building. It's that little strip mall outside of West Brattleboro Village as you head west. That's a PUD. So you can see there's PUDs all over town. A lot of them have been developed, but some of the ones I circled were not developed. And so the way the legacy PUD I went through the process, but often what would happen is like on the far left of the screen, they would put together a plan, a master plan. So the example here is for Brattleboro Memorial Hospital and the Thompson House. So it would kind of give an overview of everything that was going to happen. It might break down what the uses of the different parcels would be. You see that in the center slide. There were a couple different zones, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. So that's what you're seeing on these slides. And within each of those zones, it would give you what the dimensional standards were going to be and what uses could be allowed on the site. This was pretty typical of a lot of the PUDs that were approved in this period. Sorry. And then you'd get a map, a parcel map, so you see the different zones, and that would go on file. And then this was actual language that would then get into the final rendition that the select board would approve would be in the zoning bylaw. So this came directly from the bylaw. And again, it would go through the zones. It would just kind of formalize it and make that zoning change. So you may recall I had pointed out the SIT campus, the Scanlon PUD, the Fox Farm PUD. This is our current zoning map. And so really what you're seeing is the rural residential zoning district. This gray IT, the institutional district, that has encompassed a lot of the educational campuses and healthcare campuses that are PUDs. It also has, I think, the Winston Prouty campus is in the institutional. This is the hospital. This is the retreat farm, and then Brattleboro retreat. But some of the undeveloped PUDs have just been given a new zoning designation, rural residential, in the case of the Scanlon and the Fox Farm PUDs. And then our new PUD is, as we said earlier, we have 5. So there's the cottage cluster. And with these, there's certain districts that they can be allowed in. So you can take this PUD template, do it in the residential neighborhood, the rural residential. And really this is about getting smaller clustered homes on a parcel. And there were density bonuses, which aren't as important anymore, but still for some of the zoning districts, we still do have residential density standards, so they can be. There's the traditional neighborhood. So this would be an extension of, maybe one of our mature neighborhoods. You have to have a minimum size 2 acres to do it. It can be in the village center, neighborhood center, mixed use zoning districts, or residential neighborhood. And we're looking to kind of continue the development pattern of the pre-war neighborhoods here. There's campus development. So it basically is accommodating the needs of institutional uses, offices, or business parks. You need a minimum of 2 acres. There's no maximum residential density. There is a floor area ratio applied. And the uses are any institutional, office, or light industrial use. And there's some design standards like parking on the periphery. You have to have a massing transition to meet the neighborhood if it's in a neighborhood. And then there's some open space requirements. There's the conservation subdivision. So this is the way you would do a subdivision out in the rural or rural residential parts of town, where you actually need to set aside 60% of the land in an easement, or, for basically open space. And then you're clustering the remaining lots so that the houses are not taking up as big of a development footprint. And then the rural enterprise, this is basically, if you're a working farm, this allows some other uses on the farm to kind of support that farm or forest operation. So, so while we have these 5 templates, we've not had one application since they've been in place. Actually, that's not true. I'm sorry. There's one currently going before the Development Review Board. They are our first, and they are applying under the rural enterprise PUD. So, we have the new zoning map that shows some of the underlying zonings have kind of disappeared, that those PUDs have disappeared, but actually they still exist. And so what we say in our current regulations is, if you've had like a, you can modify it. You either have to meet the underlying zoning, you use from the uses on that list, or use what had been approved when you got the PUD approval. So for example, if the Winston Prouty, no, let's see. Yeah, if the Winston Prouty campus wanted to do, have a freight transport facility there, okay, they would look at their existing master plan. That wouldn't allow it, so they couldn't do it. They would then look to the underlying zoning that we currently have. That's not an allowed use, so they wouldn't be able to do that. So you've got 2 ways to kind of look at uses. Either follow your existing master plan, or choose from the underlying zoning. You can change the layout of the PUD as long as the overall density is no different than what is allowed likewise under the underlying zoning or under the original approval. So when they want to make changes, they come to our office, they speak to us and we give them a sense of what they can and can't do. And that has not been a barrier with the PUDs. But what hasn't happened is that, some of those undeveloped PUDs have vested rights. So we couldn't just dissolve them. So this was kind of our alternative of saying, you either have to follow your underlying or come into compliance with our new regulations. So that is, that's the planned unit developments and why we have these legacy ones out there and just how they're different from what we have now. I'm sure there's questions. There always are with PUDs.
Thoughts, anyone? Questions? Dan?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the overview, Sue. So I noticed with the campus format, there was a minimum of 2 acres. Can you give us an outline of what the absolute minimums are and why maybe the minimum sizes matter? Are there minimums for all of them?
There are minimums for all of them. I would have to go back. Hold on. Yeah. Well, no. So there's no minimum on the cottage cluster. That can be any size. The PUD.
I'm sorry, any five buildings?
No, any size. The
Any
acreage
size,
can
sorry.
be, the site can be any size,
Okay.
but design, you need 3 to 12 cottages around an open space. So a minimum of 3 to make it happen.
Cottage cluster, okay.
Yeah.
And no minimum size of, and I guess I'm also curious as if there's any relationship, if you can get to this, besides the acreage, the square footage of what constitutes like a cottage or something.
Yeah. So we did, that is a 1,200 square foot. It can't be more than 1,200 square feet. 1,600 square feet for a 2-family. So these, these may be large, and these may be something that we need to take up with the bylaw modernization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you about the acreage issue.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm going to try to
have an
share.
idea, I guess, it was just a curious because the campus can be 2 acres minimum. So I would assume there are some of them that can be even smaller than that. The cottage one has no minimum, but the other ones have minimums.
Yeah, the other ones are pretty similar to the 2-acre. I'm just trying to break the slide up again so I can go through them so you can see it. I'm just not rambling it off. Okay, so this was the cottage that we just did.
Mm-hmm.
So the traditional neighborhood, that's a minimum size of 2 acres.
Okay.
This doesn't have a unit size. It's the design standards are more about how it orients to the street. But there is a requirement here of a front porch, sidewalks and trees. So there are some design standards here that could be limiting.
Oh, I see that one. I'm sorry, I missed the. So it says open space is a minimum of quarter acre or 5% of the total
Of the 2 acres, yeah.
lot. Yeah, I see.
Or yeah, if it's more than 2 acres, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the campus development is 2 acres with 30% of open space. And again, no building size here. It has more to do with where the parking and building scale and that kind of that works. Sorry if I moved on that one too quickly. Conservation subdivision, that's another one that can be any size, but you have to meet, for this one, you actually have to meet the minimum lot size in the zoning district. So if you're in the rural residential, it's 1.5 acres. So, you're looking at, so say you have, say you have 9 acres and you want to subdivide it, you could get, what's that? 3, 6, 9. You can get 9 acres. You're going to get, why am I not doing this math quickly enough? 1.5, 3, 4. Okay, you can get nine units. No, less than 9 units. Yeah, so the number of units you're going to get, you're going to divide the lot size by the minimum lot size. I just can't do math at this
Oh, the
hour.
minimum lot size is 1.5.
Yeah,
Is that right? Okay. So
yeah.
it'd be 6. 9
6.
acres. 9 acres would be 6.
Okay,
But
thank
yeah,
you.
okay. Yeah, but I didn't know what
That's
number.
pretty
you were
pathetic.
thinking of.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's just a hypothetical, yes.
Sure.
And then if you're in the rural zoning district, which is the far western part of town, that is a 3-acre minimum lot size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that's a 60% open space. And then the rural enterprise, this is a minimum of 9 acres, actually. And that's because this is farms and forests. It's, you know, meant to be working operations.
Yeah, I guess the reason I'm asking is you probably already have thought this through more than I have, but and I think this is building from before what we've talked about, but you know, how many excuse me, how many lots are realistically going to be potential PUD sites was kind of my thinking of that for that question.
Yeah, no, we haven't thought that through. Maybe we did back in 2015. We haven't revisited it. Are you talking about in the zoning districts, like where the potential for PUDs would be?
Yeah, no, basically, like if you were to identify, and then you know, which ones are potential PUD sites, and then you know which ones are realistic, you know, as far as the topography or whatever the situation might.
No, it's a good question. I don't recall doing that in back in 2015. So that is something we should look at and be prepared.
Yeah, I mean, if I were a
Address
developer, you know, if I were thinking, you know, hey, can the planning commission or can someone in planning help me figure out, you're like, okay, I want to build one of these things. What's the best one? You know, what's the low hanging fruit or whatever?
Yeah.
Might be worthwhile. I don't know, but that
Yeah.
would be doing their homework for them, of course. But
Well, you know, I think that's what we need to do these days.
Yeah,
to, you
but-
know,
but it would
to
be
get the
super
housing
helpful.
development. So yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think that's a great suggestion.
Kind of what I alluded to with the introduction. If you all aren't aware, just to give a little background, well, there's 2 things that kind of motivated me to find out more and ask staff to put this on to prepare this for the agenda, which was that, you know, I thought for maybe a couple years, I thought when I look at the zoning map of the town, it shows which parcels are in which districts. And then you go to the district's rules and you find out what can be done in the district. And I thought for a while, okay, that's it, you know, except some exemptions and whatever that's written in there, and there's conditional, you know, approval and stuff like that. But then over time, I was finding out about more and more PUDs that have been around for, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. I don't know how long it goes back. And then, you know, some of these, or they all have, if were formed before 2015, have, you know, in their original approval, they got approved under terms that, you know, aren't our current land use regs terms, even for PUDs, right? And when it comes, so outside of PUDs now, just to compare it, I thought, well, you know, here being a property owner, when I get a permit, it only lasts for 2 years. And then it expires if I haven't initiated the use or completed construction. I can get a 1-year extension. But PUDs that have, you know, some terms that were established in the 70s, let's say, can still, like a vacant, you know, a vacant 400 acres that maybe nowadays, let's just say we want to see, our current zoning would say is rural, they could just turn that into a massive development. right? Because it still has the terms from 50 years ago. So, and I think you alluded this, you mentioned this a little bit, Sue, at the end about some legal, it's a legal contract and we can't end it, the PUDs ever, but are we just, in a sense, you know, is the future development of the town just stuck with all the PUDs we have and the terms that they were approved under, no matter how old and outdated and potentially in conflict with successive updates of the zoning?
I don't think we're just stuck with it. I wasn't able to be able to sit down with the town attorney. I mean, so what we tried to do is, you know, if they have vested, so like the Fox Farm, they have done some development up there. You know, they're a pre-existing use, I guess is what it is. We can't just, we didn't want to just extinguish it. We wanted to say, okay, you've done enough where you've vested the development, you are pre-existing. So we're going to give you some protections as a pre-existing. And so that's why you can either follow your PUD or you can, you know, just follow our existing regs. So, you know, I don't think, I would think I would have liked to have checked in on something like the Scanlon one where they never did anything. No, I think that they're probably extinguished because they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything to vest. They didn't, you know, there's no development up there. So no, they will comply with the existing zoning regulations. They wouldn't have any protections, but I do want to check that with the town attorney. That, you know, there's nothing pre-existing there. It's just something like, you know, they just get the same pre-existing rights that any other development has. If they've done nothing, no, then it's done. So we could, you know, when we talk in the existing zoning regulations, or the current ones about you can choose the underlying or you can choose our current regulations, it's more of you've done development, you've vested it, you exist. You can continue to follow that master plan or follow this. Does that make sense? Or probably
it
not
does to some degree. I mean, when you say that some of the, you know, original of the original PUD's master plan, you know, terms of development, like some of it has been carried out, you know, is that comparable? That doesn't sound comparable to you know, the zoning, the general zoning permits term, which says, you know, construction nearly completed. So, you know, it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, are you saying that the existing development is 90% of what their master plan says, or it's just like they've done 1/5 of what they said they were going to do, and so therefore
it's a pretty legal thing. I've never really had a conversation about vested rights in Vermont. There is kind of in other states there's a standard. I wouldn't say it's not 90% by any means. It can be far less than that. And what I would say about a zoning permit is they do expire after 2 years if you haven't done anything. They can be, they don't have to be 90% complete. If you're underway, you can get an extension on those. If you've done nothing, you can still request an extension.
just for 1 year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm just getting at again is it just seems odd to me that you know, a large area of our town, you know, can potentially, you know, do uses and development that isn't reflected at all in our zoning, in our current zoning. And, you know, for a lot of them, there's no expiration on that possibility ever. Like they never have to, you know, get updated when the rest of the town does. So
Yeah, I see the question. So yeah, if we're talking about something like the Grafton Village Cheese, if we decided that an industrial use wasn't appropriate there still, you know, I hear you. You know, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any specific thoughts, you know, on it, this is more of like a concern with the process and the mechanism and the,
Yeah.
the kind of integrity of the rules. Just for the sake of exaggerating, if PUDs ended up taking over the whole town, then whenever the planning commission does land use reg changes, it would have no effect. Or, I mean, it potentially, because they could all just operate based on their previous terms. So it just seems odd to me that the PUDs don't say like, construction needs to be completed in 10 years or this PUD expires.
Mhm.
I just don't know why there's.
Well, what I would say is under our new PUDs, it would be, you'd have the 2 years to complete because it's not a zoning change. It's the old ones that are the problems.
All right.
But I hear what you're saying. I will have a conversation with the attorney about it.
That'd be interesting just to know what's, are some of these PUDs from, let's say, the 70s going to exist into the third millennium and there's no way to get rid of them? I mean, sorry, I'm not saying we should get rid of them, but I'm just saying no way to update them or keep them in
Right.
line with the town values,
Right.
Anyway, I saw some other hands. That's all I wanted to.
Yeah,
Yep, Steve.
I know Dan has his hand up, but I think this point of clarity will kind of help. It's not the definitive legal answer that we might be wanting, but two things to consider. I don't know how common it is necessarily amongst all the PUDs in town or in Vermont or nationwide, but at least in some of them, and so the one that's on the Vabec campus is an example of one that does this, have some partially self-extinguishing language in the legal document that's written up, that if they don't do a certain thing by a certain time, then they cannot do that after that period. So I don't know how representative that is necessarily, but it is something that exists. And the other thing being that, at least at this point now, every PUD related case has to go before the DRB. And I believe it's treated more or less conditionally, or it's reviewed by the DRB. There are certain uses that are conditional and certain uses that are permitted in that particular context. And so I can see what you mean by there being permitted uses listed in, let's go with the Vabec one again and say 2000. And now it's 22 years later, and maybe we don't think those are appropriate anymore. And so we can't really do anything about that. But in terms of necessarily, I guess, but in terms of what was listed as conditional then, or things that are now conditional to that zoning district, the DRB would definitely have a chance to say this doesn't fit with the town plan. And even as such, with things that were listed as permitted use at that time, if it's clear it's not in keeping with the town plan, there might be some sort of leeway there. So I don't want us to necessarily have the sense that those are completely out of control, but certainly I think it's a great point that it has some unintended downstream consequences.
Dan?
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
Dan.
I may just add to that, or add to the question that you might pose, Sue, to the attorney. I guess if it is a contract, or if it's in that category, it's a contract between the current owner and the town. My only concern would be if there's some discussion of transferring that to a new owner. So if it's a contract, then that's it. You need to take another action to do something to address the contract. But if it's also some sort of covenant, like it seems like Tom's concern is that it's sort of perpetual.
Right.
That's where you get into trouble, I think. But honestly, if it's a contract and no one has any problem with it, it's not very much like a permit. It's more like, well, it's an open contract. It's just stating the terms of the relationship, I guess. But if it were some sort of transferable, relationship to a new owner, then you start to get into questions, I would think.
Yeah, well, typically it is. transferable.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, that's where Tom's
but it
concern
might
sort
be
of.
an angle. Yeah, might be an angle to look, but I'll definitely follow up with him and see what we can do. And it's probably going to take some work to figure out, yeah, the undeveloped ones and some sort of process, but
Yeah, and about, if I may also add about that sort of question of like percentage done or whatever, as long as it's in progress. I mean, you know, they could have done 1%, but it's a huge project, or, you know, it
Right.
kind of might be on a case by case, it might be appropriate that it's being done slowly, or, you know, who knows? Just want to put that in there that, you know, if they're 90%, that's great, but even if they're only 1 or 2%, then maybe that's the way they've got to do it, you know?
So if I could also add before we move on, if we were moving on, one thing that might interest the commission is, I know we had some conversations about it in the department, not actually all that recently, but this is reminding me of the conversation, that in a lot of subdivisions that are sort of legacy subdivisions for pretty much always single family residential, there can be covenants that are attached to that subdivision that are more restrictive than our zoning is now. And that, you know, Tom, you talk about sleeping giants. The legal implications of that could have significant impacts on our ability to actually make effect through the zoning updates if we can't get those to get out of the way of what we've allowed in terms of housing. So I think we had been wanting to figure out what are our options with that. And I figure that's worth flagging. That's probably something that the Planning Commission might find interesting to know more about.
Okay, if there's no more questions or thoughts on the PUDs, let's move on to the last one, the last substantive item on the agenda. A little late going into this, so we'll try to make it quick and still finish up at 8. If you all will recall, except for Sarah, I brought up this idea back in November, just to, it seemed to me that there was, you know, in kind of the context of, you know, wanting more housing in the town, there kind of being the housing crisis, and thinking about what options there are, and then also, you know, what parcels could be freed up in a sense, but then also with the downtown design plan, you know, finished last year, and with proposals for public spaces and town owns parking lots and stuff like that. And then also going up around downtown and noticing that there wasn't some signage. It seemed like there was, you know, missing directional signage for some of our lots and garage. And also, I should step back a second, you know, like on Facebook comments and in other avenues, I see people, you know, kind of complaining that they feel like there's a lack of parking in town, or it's hard to park near to where they want. And the planning department and commission sponsored, I guess is the word, this parking study several years ago, which found that actually we have more than enough parking, and it's almost never full on certain spots, like on Main Street and like on weekends, like next to the Whetstone restaurant on the depot lot. There can be moments of where it's at full capacity, certain spaces and lots, but not too far away, only maybe a block away. So for most people, easy walking distance, there's more than enough space to park nearby. So I thought a way to address this and kind of bring all these things together, because if parking can be done more efficiently and people are aware, especially visitors to the area who, you know, haven't gotten the chance to you know, try out different lots and see the different rates and know the options that exist. Those new visitors, if they can realize that, you know, Main Street and Harmony lot aren't their only options, that there is a parking garage, that there is High Grove, that there is Harris, and the rates are lower there, that it could potentially, you know, free up some of Harmony Lot to be a park, or some of these concerns about the main street stores and businesses not being too accessible for motorists could be freed up. So anyway, I did it a more comprehensive since that meeting, look around. Gary drove me around, so I'll thank him for that. It was a fun ride, and kind of went hog wild here, taking all these pictures and making it a very visual thing. It's just a draft right now. I'm limiting it, first of all, just to signage, to directional signage. So as you'll see, one thing that first made me think that there was some potential with something that needed to be addressed and could be improved is, going right up Main Street where you cross Flat Street, there's no directional pointed signage to the motorists to tell them that there's parking down Flat Street to the in the Preston lot or in the garage. And on Elliott Street, there's just signage one way. But whereas when you get to High and Grove streets, for the most part, there is good signage both ways. So there's other aspects too, like, a sign might be behind poles and not too visible, and it could be somewhere more prominent. But all I mean for this to be is it's just, an assessment of the wayfinding signs that can direct people to the lots and garage that are pay by the hour, not the permitted ones, because those are, most likely people who are already in the know are the ones getting permits. But people, casual visitors or tourists, or whatever terms you want to use, are the ones who need the signage. And so I'm thinking, I don't know, what would happen with this document. I guess I don't think it would be like the other thing I brought to the committee to the commission 2 months ago, where it was a request to the select board. I mean, maybe it would go to DPW or the town manager. I'm not sure. So that's enough on that. And like I said, this is a draft, and a lot of those pictures I haven't added little comments to, and those comments can be kind of cleaned up and made a little more professionally worded or something like that. But I'd love to hear people's feedback and what they think of this approach, and questions if things are unclear, and especially maybe from staff, like how to direct this or format it, or to make it affect change.
I think this is great, Tom. This is all stuff that I've definitely noticed too, just being around town. I personally hate those brown signs. I don't know why Vermont does them. I feel like also on state routes, they have these like brown signs that like are like weird abbreviations. Not that we have them here, but I don't get it. And it's not visible, and it's like not easy to read. So yeah, that's something that I've definitely noticed as well. And I think to your point about like people complaining about lack of parking, yeah, it's not true. There's not a lack of parking. I think people just want to like step out of their car and like take 5 steps and be at the place that, their destination, but that's not what it means to be in a downtown. And so I think, yeah, this is sort of a great evaluation of like where there's a lack of parking signs. And of course, living here, like I know where all of them are, but I imagine coming down Main Street and having no signage on Elliott or Flat saying that there are lots that way, like how would you know? So yeah, I support any sort of moving forward if there is a way to do that on getting more signage for parking.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll just reiterate here, I agree with everything you said, but I'll just also add for a little more impact. I kind of said it there with Flat and Elliott, but of all the lots and garage, the garage, which I would think is where we ideally want to, utilize it the most because of all the expense that went into it, and it's bigger than any other. It actually has the worst signage, both getting to it and at it, as you can see by the map and the pictures. So it's, it doesn't seem aligned with what our priorities are. Because that's also priced the lowest, you know. Yep, anyone else? Prudence?
I agree as well. I think it's great. I thought staff did that. That was great work, Tom and Gary. And I hope, you know, I hope it would be something somewhat simple that could go to DPW and make it happen, but I have no idea about that. In terms of, yeah, let's get those signs, let's improve the signage.
Yep. Dan?
I know this is pie in the sky, but what would be great would be for at least some of those signs to actually have a count of how many parking spots are currently available with a countdown relative, you know what I mean? Then you'd have evidence, you know, and you'd have a clear message to people, you know, that there's a certain number. I know that's pie in the sky, but there are some parking, you know, facilities that have that kind of information available. So maybe if it's possible just to do it at the transportation center, that would be great. But I know that's asking a lot.
We're gonna have to find a grant for that one.
Yeah, no, I'm not right. Well, you know, but it's the kind of thing that, you know,
Yeah,
that people come to expect that kind of information sometimes, you know,
Yeah.
say you're coming from New York City or whatever. So
Mhm.
they don't want to, in other words, they don't want to drive around the whole parking garage to find out that there's zero parking, you know.
I also know of, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say this here, but I know of plenty of people that choose the parking garage to park and not pay, and oftentimes don't get ticketed. So, not that we want to advertise that, but you know, it's just sort of evident of like, there are spaces available, and yeah, it's just people don't want to walk anymore, and it's so sad.
Gary. Gary, you're up, if you want to be.
Well, no, I'll let Sue go, then I'll kind of recap our little venture downtown.
Yeah,
Oh.
Sue. Sorry.
So I just want to say, I thought this was great too. It was pretty eye-opening. I mean, I'm familiar with some of the lack of signage, like when I'm walking from the municipal center, and yeah, this was really great. I think moving it forward, I will probably definitely share it, well, when it's ready, you know, whatever time we want to take it, with the town manager and the assistant town manager. Some of the signs, the brown signs, you know, I know they were grant funded. I don't know the history of that design. I have seen it in other towns. So, but for sure the parking signage, having a consistent look, more signage, I think that's something that probably Public Works would make those signs, but, so I'll figure out how to move this forward when it's ready to be moved forward.
Okay.
I'll let you know what the path is.
I do want to also add sort of the piece you were talking about. I think you mentioned this about like maybe potentially, you know, something like Harmony Lot being more, you know, sort of open space or public space and less of a parking lot. Like I've heard that idea thrown around town a lot over the years. And I think if you know, sort of through this process, like that's sort of like a goal that we have, I really support that and think that would be cool if we could figure out how to do something like that.
Yeah,
If
as
I
you
could-
see, I mean, I didn't make it, you know, a treatise or anything, but I did put a sentence in there, you know, of that, you know, improving the signage could justify, you know, taking a lot out of or partially out of service as a parking lot and divert it towards something else, you know, that we value, like a downtown, you know, town square public space or you know, housing above a shared use lot. But yeah, so I'm with you there, Sarah. I think all of our town parks are automobile viewing stations, and that is the one that has the potential to be kind of like a European town square with shops and cafes and a ice skating rink and farmer's market and you know, and you know, music and events. So much more so than any of the other parks do. So that's some of my motivation personally. Yeah, Gary, I think you want to go.
Yeah, I
next.
guess what we mentioned also too, probably having some of the people down from Parking Authority give some feedback also on their perspective about the parking area too, what their thoughts may be. Because I was usually down there talking to Carol and some of them down there about their thoughts, and also about AD accessibility. When I was on the ADA committee, a lot of that was an issue too, with parking for some people that had to get out in wheelchairs and other places to get in and out from areas. And a lot of times the signage isn't visible or available for a lot of people. It's letting people know that there are ADA accessibility places for them to park. So there's a lot of other areas to expound on. Like I said, we went out to other areas out towards West B for parking, like for people for schools in that areas and up along other areas like that. So this will be a continued effort on other areas that may not be accessible for some people as well also. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to some more outside venture with Mr. Tom and see what else we can discover. Especially once the train, the Amtrak goes up as well also, to see how that's going to go.
Yeah.
Parking.
Yeah, Gary, like I said, you know, if this goes, you know, if this goes well and, you know, has some tangible effect, then, you know, there's nothing better than motivation than, you know, recognition of one's work, you know, taking effect. But you know, I'm hoping that just to keep this this assessment limited to the directional signage, just to pay per hour lots. But you know, if you know, if it works out, then I could see us expanding to some other related themes like you're bringing up. So I like the enthusiasm. Before I call on Dan there, Sue, you know a little bit about those brown signs that a couple of us brought up. Does anyone, another reason to maybe reconsider those brown signs isn't there no welcome center anymore? And all those brown signs say welcome center?
Yeah. These were part of, and that's what I noticed when I was looking at the signs. I'm like, no wonder people ask where there's a welcome center. I think these were part of the Connecticut River Byway, possibly may have been from a downtown transportation grant, but yeah, the welcome center never got off the ground. And the only other thing I wanted to say is that the new town manager is very supportive of other uses for parking lots. Let me just put it that way. So, you know, I think that you know, particularly the Harmony lot, there'll probably be discussions moving forward pretty quickly.
Great. Man.
Yeah, this is along the same lines as the comment about the welcome center brown signs. But I appreciate all the work you guys did on this, and I guess if you are going to pass this along or you're working on it as a draft, you know, the key that you give is very euphemistic in its use of you know, very kind words, but I suggest being a little more harsh about it. Like, for example, the yellow one's moderately deficient. I mean, that's very kind of you. But you know, one way to put it, like with the welcome center or the cluster of these signs, especially at the branching intersections 1 and 3, for example, the pictures you gave, you know, it would be, I don't know what the technical terms for it would be, but you know, it certainly needs to be rethought, or you know, there's a certain amount of, I don't know, there must be some critical criticism that a signage person could give for these. And whatever that language is, I would throw it at it, you know, because I mean, those, and I just wanted to highlight those 2 intersections, you know, Green and High Street and Elm and Canal. I mean, those are the entryways, right? Essentially, except for north south, you know, but coming from, you know, from West Brattleboro or south, and so those really are, I would say, could be massively improved. Those two alone. But of course, all of them, you know, but those two, if you look at that, it's almost like a joke, really, honestly. But I don't know what the technical language for it would be.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I think before I did this, I tried doing a little research about, you know, what's good signage or for parking, and I found some general things, you know, like you know, using the big P as a symbol is good, you know, don't make it complex, and obviously make it where people can see it. And but besides a few obvious things like that, mostly what I was coming across was like state codes, you know, for the engineers to follow, and I was just like, oh, I'm not gonna look through that. So I actually didn't find much that was just like simple for the layman, but using some of that, I don't know if it exists, but like you're saying, signage jargon. So I just gave up, and I just, you know, wrote down the vernacular that I have. So,
Well,
yep.
if I may add, some of that engineering language, I think, has to do with efficiency for, you know, people being able to read something while they're going at 15 miles or 20 miles an hour in a car. And this is just not sufficient. I don't think it's sufficient for that purpose, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah, and I just summarized that by saying lettering, you know, too small and complex. So
yeah,
just layman's words, but I don't
Yeah,
think
you're
there's-
also talking about nighttime too, Tom. At night, as you know, it's not fluorescent. So when
Yeah,
you're
you know,
driving at night, the lightage in this town is not the great, especially for
Yeah.
people like me.
No.
I like to talk
Yeah,
about.
no, I actually did stand on Canal Street behind cars pulling into that #1 sign, and the sign didn't really light up at all. Whereas then down at the #5 sign there at Flat Street, the white and green P, that one lit up quite a bit. So I felt comfortable saying that brown is just really not reflective at all.
Yeah, I was trying to look for some fireflies to light it up for me.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be better than.
I haven't seen any.
Okay, well, you know, I'm definitely going to revise it a bit more. Well, not revise, but just finish it and clean up the wording a little bit. And then I'll just bring it to the commission again at a future meeting next month or two from now, and we'll see what Sue can do with it, I guess. Okay. There being no public, we'll skip that. And once again, so I don't think Sarah knows the little spiel that I gave when I decided to add this as an agenda item to some of our meetings. This is the agenda suggestions for next meetings that people can make. I mean, all commissioners should feel welcome to, you know, just contact me or Sue whenever in between meetings. So this is kind of unnecessary, but it's also maybe, you know, an opportunity, especially when we're not, you know, when we have 10 minutes left instead of 1 minute, but to kind of just, what's the word, like, not temperature check, but I don't know, just kind of pitch ideas to the group and see if, kind of like what I did with this parking one, like, do you guys have interest? Do you think there's potential here? Do you see the need? And then we can put it on the agenda. But I don't know if anyone has any ideas or any thoughts, or wondering where something went from past meetings that seemingly got dropped, or anything at all.
I'll be sure to email you if anything.
Okay.
I know how to
That's
get
fine
back
as
in contact with Sue. So if any thoughts.
Okay, yeah, I know Dan came up with an idea a few months ago, and maybe has another one. Go ahead.
oh, that one that's by the wayside now. No, this is I want to specifically follow up on something from the housing study that I think I also kind of put to the side, which is tiny houses. I just want to at some point have a chance to kind of you know, address some of the dynamics, you know, and questions that are still pressing with you know, tiny home building and placement, and what the demand really is in the area, those kinds of things. I think it really warrants some serious discussion, but I think I myself included, we kind of put it off to the side with the housing study, but it's certainly it's one tool, I think, to be considered. And I don't know where to go with that, but I just wanted to kind of say that at some point, if we could put that on the agenda to flesh out what the issues are.
Okay.
So in the meantime as well, in the deliverable I'm expecting to bring to next month's meeting, if we have time to put that on, or else probably April, tying together the walking tours that we just did, there was a part of it I was going to devote to speaking about tiny houses and where they might be the most useful form of infill or not. So I think we could totally do a more direct focus, but within a conversation about a few other types of infill housing as well, I was going to devote some time to tiny homes.
Also, I was going to add, I guess, I don't know if this is still I don't know if it's being a dead horse or if something I had in the back burner, I was still investing some research and information to was into Habitat for the Humanity. Dan and I were looking into that. I didn't know what the thoughts were afterwards because we were too busy doing other things dealing with, the infill housing and other, and with the bike ped. So I have one more phone call conversation. I need to contact an individual to see what it is the needs are. Perhaps maybe bring the individual as a guest speaker to talk more about it, to get thoughts and see if that's something that would interest the planning commission to take investment in, to see if that's something we can go forward with. Just to get a pulse to see what your thoughts are, if it's something that you would want to do, and if not, then we could just leave it on the floor.
Okay, noted. I wonder if people, did you want to respond to that, Dan? I know you've talked with Gary.
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah, Gary and I have talked about it a bit, and part of that would be recognizing or sort of doing a post-mortem on the fact that Habitat was active here for a while, and yeah, just to kind of, I'm not sure who Gary has in mind, but there's certainly a lot to talk about with it.
Okay. Are people, Sarah, you may not know about this, but last year, some of us with members of some other committees formed a preferred solar siting subcommittee, which is like a state program. It's called, preferred siting for energy, and it gets extra incentives if it qualifies. And so related to that, but not really part of the charge of that subcommittee, was since we were thinking so much about solar and renewable energy, we came up with a list of recommendations just for the planning commission or the select board to kind of consider implementing or thinking about more. And that the thing of last meeting of January, the incentive, the RTM article was part of that. And I'm wondering if people, still have some interest in looking at those recs and picking a couple here or there and working on them, in future meetings to further. You can look at it different ways, just advancing solar energy in town, or figuring out our rules and values and around them, or both. Might be a good way of kind of summarizing all those recs. People interested in that, or?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I've had this one of the ideas on there is to, it might be too much of a requirement to put on development in this day and age in this town, to that certain buildings of a certain size that are new or substantially reworked need have solar on the roof. But I've thought maybe one of the considerations that the DRB has the power to consider when they're reviewing, in that long list of like 12 or 15 categories, it could be, like, will this building be built to have the structural capacity to have solar panels on, put on the roof at a future date? because sometimes that's the excuse, that's the rationale of a lot of property owners why they can't put it on presently, because the building's not designed, not engineered to have that capability. So that may be kind of a less of a lift, and ask of property owners, just to bolster up their structure a bit to have that capacity for the future, but not to actually spend the tens of thousands to put the solar on there even if the land use regs have the power to do such a thing. But anyway, getting into too much detail about that. Sorry. Anything else? If not, okay, having no other business, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Alrighty.